This evening's meeting, we have a special meeting. City manager, please.
Mayor Brinkman.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Valdez.
Present.
Councilmember Cole. Councilmember Driscoll. Councilmember Elrod. Councilmember Fay.
Here.
Councilmember Schlachter.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum this evening. Our first order of business on our special meeting, I'd like to introduce Ken Feldman. Ken Feldman has been asked to support the city for this particular meeting, so thank you, Ken, for being here. This is ID 19039, ratifying and approving placing the city attorney on paid administrative leave. I have talked to each of you individually about the reasons for placing our city attorney, Steve Kemp, on paid administrative leave. This special meeting is intended to ratify and approve that decision. This is a personnel matter, and as such, we should not be discussing the specifics until this issue reaches a conclusion, at which time the council will consider the appropriate action. Councilmember Schlachter, did you have a question?
I just had, do you have a motion in a second? Should I ask?
Go ahead and ask.
Okay, I just had a question for HR Director Mink. This is the your recommendation for the process to be followed for?
Yes. Thank you. I'm going to make a motion and I'll ask for a second. Motion to place the city attorney on paid administrative leave effective February 8th until council takes further action.
Second.
We'll do a roll call vote. City manager.
Mayor Brinkman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Valdez.
Yes.
Councilmember Cole.
Yes.
Councilmember Fay.
Yes.
Councilmember Schlachter.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Next is item ID 19040, and this is a motion to appoint an interim city attorney. Mr. Feldman has acted as the city's interim city attorney multiple times in the past, and he has agreed to perform that role once again, if so asked. The appointment would be through his law firm of Kissinger and Feldman PC. I make a motion to approve Ken Feldman as the interim city attorney until council takes further action.
Second.
A motion and a second. City manager?
Mayor Brinkman.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Valdez.
Yes.
Councilmember Cole.
Yes.
Councilmember Fay.
Yes.
Councilmember Schlachter.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, council. I now adjourn our special meeting and we will begin our study session. So this evening's study session, we start off with one of our P4s, and this is on a Delaware and Powers development. So we'll have staff presentation on that. Hello, introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Mayor Brinkman. My name is Mike Sutherland. I'm the planning manager. And this is Rob Haig. He's the planner too for the city of Littleton. So with no further ado, we'll get on with the presentation. We will present together, and I'll start off. This is the Delaware and Powers preliminary project plan process, or P4. And this is the fourth P4 process we have completed in the city since adopting it about a year ago. At the P4 meeting, we'll do a brief presentation. No council action is necessary. This is all advisory, and all comments are non-binding. The applicant is present here in the audience, but will not be allowed to give any testimony, same with the public. And a quick overview of the development. The applicant has completed a pre-application meeting, at which point we advised them of the availability to do the P4 process, which is an optional process for the development. They did apply for that. This property at Delaware and Powers, and we'll have a map coming up, is zoned IP and IPPDO. So, in plain language, that is an industrial district, and an industrial district with a planned development overlay. The planned development overlay was approved, 2017, 2017 and allowed for a storage use on the eastern side of the property. If this applicant moves forward from tonight, they can request a removal of the PDO and a formal plan development application submittal, which would go to the Planning Commission and then to City Council for approval. And then a final, since this is the residential development, they need a final PD plan, which is administrative and acts much like a site development plan for the case.
So I'll kind of jump into the technical pieces of the presentation. I'm going to go through these slides rather quickly, kind of give a summary of the project and the property, and then after that we can have time for discussion. Feel free to jump in and ask me any questions that you have as I'm going through these slides. I'm also happy to return to any slides at the end of the presentation. But this is the subject property highlighted in green here. As Mike indicated, it's zoned IP on the western half of the property, and the eastern half of the property is zoned IP with a planned development overlay. So the IP zone district allows for a variety of uses ranging from office and retail to assembly and light fabrication. On the IP PDO side, the use that's allowed on that portion of the property is the mini warehousing, and it's specific to that as approved by the PDO. So surrounding the subject property on the north is also IP zoning, and to the south, east, and west is R5 residential. So the proposal for this 8.8 acre parcel, 99 single-family residential units, comes out to about 11.25 acres, dwelling units per acre. So as you move further out from the subject property, particularly closer to South Broadway and West Littleton Boulevard, there are more commercially zoned areas that also contain commercial uses and business uses. To the north of the subject property is the Norgren site, and then Littleton Preparatory School. Powers Park and Progress Park are both within this quarter-mile radius of the site. To the east of the property, as you continue, there's more single-family and multifamily residential zoned property. So this shows an overview of the site and the open space summary. So this is the PDR property with single-family residential being the use. 50% is the requirement for open space across the entire site. This is not something that can be altered through the PDR process or the PD process. The site concept here shows a majority of the open space requirement being met through common open space, and then with a fraction of that being included on lot, so on the individual lots. So the darker green areas are the on-lot. They surround the residences in white. The property does also include a private street that provides access from Bannock and Powers. And then otherwise, the properties have vehicular access provided to them by alleys that access garages on the first floor of each unit. So this exhibit shows kind of an aerial view of the proposed development. So in white on the right-hand side of the screen is the proposed single-family development. The left-hand side is the south side of Powers, so we're looking down Powers here. Again, you can see the setback. So the lots are very small, so when you look at the land use table, the zoning comparison, the setbacks are quite small. However, because of the common open space that's provided along the public rights of way, that establishes this larger 30-foot setback from the adjacent Powers right of way.
Bob,
Yes,
are those driveways in front?
that's a good question. So those are just sidewalks. So these
Sidewalks off the main sidewalk?
That's
So
correct.
then it shows on one of these that looks like grass. Is that grass?
it will be grass, or that's some landscaped area. Currently, I believe it's paved or dirt.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all rear-loaded units.
Okay.
So the white is the proposed new concrete flat work there, and then the gray that is just from the satellite imagery of the dirt lot. Right?
That's correct.
Hold on. The what looks like horizontal stripes, if you look at the drawing,
Yes.
literally, what are those?
So those are the proposed sidewalks. They would access
Oh,
from-
there's sidewalks that go up to,
Yeah.
and that is, rather than gray, is going to be green in between the stripes?
We are not expecting gray rock.
Well,
will be a-
it looks like asphalt.
Yeah, I know. No, it's just an illustrative to show a shadow study. There would be landscaping in that area.
And what's the amount of that setback?
So the width of that open space in between the individual lots and the right-of-way is 30 feet. In this, there's also the 5-foot sidewalk and the 14-foot approximately tree lawn that's in the Powers right-of-way. So.
Thank you.
Mhm. But yeah, the gray is just from the image that's current satellite image.
There would be front doors facing to the west, right there, and then there would be garage access through it. It's like an alley.
Correct. Yeah, they're all rear loaded. Front doors will face the streets. And there'll be pretty colors on the buildings. They won't just be white.
And this image might show it a little bit better. It does show the proposed landscaping and the conceptual design. So you can see again, not the gray. You do have some trees. This would all be generally provided in the formal application, in the general plan, development plan, and then the final landscaping plan, where exactly things are going to be placed, would be part of the final plan, development plan. But anyway, this does show how the lots do have as Mike said, the rear-loaded vehicular access. They would have front pedestrian access off of Powers, Delaware, and South Bannock. So the right-of-way does include, or actually before I get to that, so the lots or the individual units each have a 2-car garage on the first floor. The required amount of parking spaces for the 99 proposed units is 198. That requirement per the code is met in the off-street parking in the garage spaces. The applicant has shown.
One more time, you said it is met?
That's correct.
So one more time, just.
So the code requirement for off-street parking for two spaces per dwelling unit is met on the off-street or in off-street parking in 2-car garages under each unit.
So just the garages.
Off-street and the garage, you said?
No, so all of the required parking is
Met by garage?
that's correct.
Oh, oh.
And then there's additional, and so one of the reasons I wanted to make that, to call this out is because there is a parking provided number that has 279 spaces on this plan here. That number does include on-street parking that's provided along the existing rights-of-way and the proposed private street.
How many are on street?
So the on-street parking
57.
is, yes, 57 along, and that's along the existing rights-of-way. And then on the private internal street, it's 14 additional spaces.
14, 24.
Okay, I can tell you right now.
24, thank you.
I have a huge problem with that, and I can tell you, part of it may be our own problem with the way that we have our parking. I live in a complex where it's the same thing. And it's not 2 garages, it's 1 garage, but they count the garage and they count the drive as parking. So what you've got is you've got 99 parking, or 99 apartments, you've got 2 parking spaces for each of those, so you're assuming there's only going to be 2 people with cars. And then what you've got is, if you've got 99 units, you have that on-street parking is public parking. That's for anybody. They're not controlling that. That neighborhood fills up with parking because they're challenged with parking because of the density of the neighborhood as it is. So there are 14 parking spaces for guests.
24, I misspoke earlier.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, that makes a big difference. That's not enough. That's just not enough. That creates, what happens then is that guests start to park in places where they shouldn't, and there starts to become a real parking challenge there. And I live it, I see it. The density of that creates that problem.
Carol, for me.
We have a very similar development at Littleton Village, and we have been struggling with parking at that place. I've been on council a year. The first two emails I got were about parking problems at Littleton Village, and we haven't resolved them at all, largely because there isn't enough space to park, and it's very similar to this. No driveways, garages, and people park on that private street. It's a fire lane. It's marked as a fire lane. People park there anyway, so there's a safety hazard. And so far, Littleton hasn't been able to do anything about that parking, largely because it's on private property. So the citizens contact us, say, help us, there's somebody parked across my garage, I can't get out. And there's somebody parked in the public street. If there was a fire equipment could not get in, and nobody can do anything about it. So we're prepared to duplicate that unworkable situation with this.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of counting the public row spaces in the street, because that's not any new parking that's dedicated to the units here. But they are two-car garages, correct?
That's as it's described in
Described.
they
But-
haven't.
But there is no driveway space because it's all alley access and no one can park there, so.
Right, and how many people do you know have a two-car garage that they park two cars in? Ain't gonna happen. Well, a lot of people don't, particularly, they use
So, yeah, so.
park for storage.
So I would like to
it's-
see more private parking dedicated to the units here, whether it's visitor parking or for residents there, but
Do these have basements?
I do not believe they have basements.
I don't believe they do either. And the Littleton Village units like this do have basements to store things in. So these will be even more pressure to do storage in the garage. And thus have no room to park.
Very valid concerns. Staff has noted them.
Jerry?
Go ahead, I'm sorry, you were mid-sentence.
You can go ahead before I move, and then I'll move on to the next slide after you.
But I was just going to say, what is it, 99 units?
That's correct.
When I was looking at this the other night, I was thinking, really, it's about a 75-unit property at most. It's just way too packed in there with units. That neighborhood over there has a lot of cars, a lot of apartments over there, period. And it's all street parking over there. So I think in order to get parking adequate over there for this property, and it's a good-looking property over there, I think it'll be great for that neighborhood. It's just that to rely on street parking is not going to be good for that part of the neighborhood over there. So I think the number of units have got to be reduced substantially. Go ahead, sorry.
Thank you. So beyond the parking concerns, the reasons that the applicant is moving forward with the P4 and then the potential PDR on the subject property rather than going with one of the straight zoning districts is the flexibility to provide open space along the common areas, which allows them to create the smaller, tight lots, the individual lots that have a much smaller setback rather than the setbacks that would be required even in R5, which is the highest density residential zone district.
what are the proposed sizes, square footage, bedrooms, baths of the units? I didn't remember seeing that.
So I don't have the application materials in front of me. I believe they were in between 1,750 to 2,000 square feet, somewhere in there.
So
Yeah, average size is about 1,700 square feet per unit.
3-bedroom, 4-bedroom?
I think there's a range.
Yeah, I think it's 2 and, well, I'm not sure. I'll have to look at that.
A question, if you don't mind. It indicated that are they meeting or exceeding what we're calling open space, which we really need to change that. It's green space, it's not open space, right?
I mean, the private drive.
We think of open space differently, in terms of public land and parks. So anyway, we all know it's what this really is. So what, is it exceeding or meeting?
So based on the concept drawing, they're just meeting it. So
And that does not include the patios on top, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Because one of the other things that I think needs to be recognized when these types of developments are being done, particularly when they're in it's a dense development and it's in a dense neighborhood. There are a couple of parks in the area. One of them is rather small, but there's an awful lot of people that will be moving in here that have dogs, have pets, more than one in an apartment. You can have 99 apartments and you can have 200 dogs. And if you have not planned your open space, green space properly and made it so that it's attainable for everybody to be able to use in those fashions, then that becomes, I think, in my opinion, really a health hazard and a quality of life issue. So, questioning that here too.
Thank you. So I'll keep pushing through, and like I said, more discussion, or if you want to go back to any slides, welcome to do so. So this slide just kind of lays out, I'm not going to go through all of these numbers, but another reason that the applicant is deciding to move forward with a PDR rather than one of the straight zone districts is the additional height that's being requested. So 43 feet would be the proposed maximum height rather than 30 feet that's allowed in the other residential zone districts. This is largely to accommodate a portal to the rooftop deck, and we can look at some elevations in just a slide or two. Again, 11.5 units per acre. The front setback, and this is really through that open or green space, is 30 feet from the adjacent public rights-of-way. Between the adjacent alleys or the fronts of any of the individual smaller lots, it's actually much less.
The 30 feet is including, that's from the curb, right?
That's correct. It's actually
From the property line.
from the property line. So there will be a tree lawn and a sidewalk that will be within the right-of-way. That's not included in that 30 feet.
The 30 feet, as I looked at the drawing, looks like it starts at the curb.
So
It's this one. Let me bring that up.
Is this the drawing that you were referring to?
No, it was a different one. There's one of the other, I have to give you a chance. Yeah, I was thinking.
Your claim's 30 feet, right?
Yeah, we can verify that. This is the
Right.
drawing.
That's just what I thought.
Yeah, we can verify that, but this is the drawing we were looking at that shows a 30-foot space from the property line to,
Sidewalk.
Right, to the
Yeah.
sidewalk. And this is also
Which is the
something that
property.
we've scaled out on the plans from the property line to the edge of the individual lots. That does not include the sidewalk and the tree lawn.
So it'd be almost 50 feet from curb to property line?
Approximately, I'm sure it varies
Yeah.
from lot to
yeah,
lot.
it
but-
varies a little bit because they've got sort of a buffer area built in. So you've got property lines around small properties that surround the house. And then you've got a buffer space between the property line of the house and the right-of-way. And that buffer space is about 30 feet. And in that previous chart, we kind of compared that to the front setbacks of the surrounding neighborhood and what's available in the current zoning.
So otherwise, on this slide, you can see the proposed maximum height kind of in relation to the adjacent properties on the south side of Powers. And again, Powers is about a 33-foot travel way that sits within a larger right-of-way that includes those other facilities.
I will say, I do like the staggered heights. I think we see a lot of these dense multifamily developments come in where they're just real flat. And I do like the staggered. I think that it adds a good dimension to it.
And so also on that staggered point. So these are some of the same units that would be, or similar units that would be constructed on this property or that are included in this conceptual proposal. These are taken from other sites in my understanding is the Denver metro area. So this is kind of what we would see. And again, you see the several different units with that.
Kyle?
While I don't have a issue with the aesthetics of these buildings, I do think they are, a little cookie cutters. The same things are over, in various developments. And the fact that this is, 2 blocks north of Littleton Boulevard, and we've just got a nice study about the mid-century modern architecture of that. I would like to see some sort of tie-in to either one of those styles, or even a mix of the types of architecture that you see on Littleton Boulevard, to make it kind of more unique to Littleton and speak to Littleton rather than speak to anywhere in the Front Range.
And at the same time, I would not want to see it be the same architect as the building that's surrounding it.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the apartments around it.
Yeah,
I was thinking of the
the ones that's called out in that
Right.
study, yeah.
Carol?
To height. It looks like when I do some rough dimensioning with this picture, the one you had on one of the gray, the one that shows the 30 feet, that the additional height of the proposed building there above the existing one across the street is almost 100% higher. If you include the elevation of the ground, not taking the, that's what we see. That seems like it doesn't really fit in, and I think we have some guidelines that things should fit into their surrounding areas, and so even though allowing that Debbie says it's interesting with the varying heights, you still have the extreme height compared to the other buildings, because that ground does count as to how high the building gets to be.
Definitely as it's perceived from Powers.
And again, if you look at the houses like that at Littleton Village, if you're coming up Fremont, going east on Fremont toward Broadway, those things really stick up, and they aren't even on elevated land. So these are going to stick up even more. And so, that's, stick up is the design, but we need to decide, is that what we want?
And speaking of that, it might be a good time to look at this slide, which
Can we
is...
back up just
Oh,
a second
Yeah, sure.
to that one? When I look at that, I'm wondering what the devil the space between the buildings is for. You could flap your tablecloth out there and make a whole lot of racket out there, but you couldn't do too much more in that space. Why have the space at all as opposed to just mash them together and have a lot more open space outside?
So I think this is kind of conjecture on my part, but I think the Cityscape project was developed as a response to townhomes and the problems with construction defects that sort of plagued townhomes for a long time in the metro area. Cityscape was developed to kind of have a townhome feel to it, but have individual buildings to avoid that
Just looks
construction
schizophrenic
defects.
to me, I'm sorry. It does not look communal. It doesn't look inviting. It doesn't look neighborhoody. It looks like, I'm sorry, it looks like bombed out things that I saw when I was in Europe. I'm sorry, that's just what it
Well, no.
reminds me of.
Yeah, I was, you had asked about what the idea was there between the space and the buildings, and I think that's where it originated.
I don't know a lot of people that would like this style, where they, it's not a connected house. They have their own lot, their own land, but they don't have a whole lot of yard. So,
They don't have any yard.
well, I think a lot of there's a desire for some people for that. Not everyone wants a
But
quarter acre.
having no yard is better than having that much.
Maybe in your opinion, but not in everyone's.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is the right time to bring up this question. Is the next slide talking about the design of the home or let's go on to the next slide and I might hold my question for
Okay.
later.
Yeah, we can always come back to slides. We can kind of finish off the presentation portion, and then as you have questions, we can go back to the slides.
I might hold my question then.
Okay. This slide, and I'm supposed to move over this very quickly, but we had a use by special exception to remove this from the floodplain, this property from the floodplain. That was approved by Planning Commission probably a month ago. And basically, this slide shows the elevation of Powers, which is at 5,428 feet. The top of the site to the north is approximately 3 to 4 feet higher. There's a floodplain that's shown in gray in the middle, and they'll need to elevate the site to get it out of the floodplain. And they'd elevate it approximately 5 to 6 feet in that portion. And these are kind of condensed, so I'm supposed to get off of this slide fairly quickly.
Is that closer to Delaware, that low spot?
Yes, so it's all that corner. The drainage kind of flows through that area and into the park to the west. So, and this is sort of the way it was described to the Planning Commission, it's sort of a back eddy. So if they remove it from the floodplain, it doesn't affect the floodway as it goes through and wouldn't adversely affect adjacent properties. The flow still makes it through.
And so the requirement is if there is a floodplain, you have to develop above it. Regardless of what's being developed on this property, this elevation would need to happen. Is a
Correct.
requirement.
Correct.
And the elevation that they went to, which looks like 5433, is well above what would have been required. So as long as they were at right above the gray, they would have been fine, but they chose to go higher. Or is that just visually how it looks?
So there's many steps to removing it from the floodplain.
Okay, then never mind, we don't have to talk about that.
We are going to take a careful look at that in the grading plans and make sure that they're not doing anything excessive in the area. So,
Carol?
I would be concerned about the effect on the whole area, because you can't just fill in an area and say it doesn't affect the surrounding area. You know that.
Yes.
I know that.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So some hydraulic engineers have looked at that issue very carefully.
We're sure of that?
Yeah.
Are they hydraulic engineers?
Yes,
Okay.
both the developers and ours agree that
Okay.
the proposed changes to this area, and then it would have to go through a federal process as well. But the proposed changes to the area wouldn't have adverse effects on the surrounding properties, some of which are built in some fairly tricky areas that have floods occasionally. So, yeah, it's a tricky area, but they need
Okay,
to
thank you.
modify this to get it out of that.
We didn't let you go past this fast at all.
Yeah, I know, I was supposed to really cruise through this. So, in conclusion, and we can easily go back to any of the slides, this is, we present the P4 concept. It's an optional piece that the developers elected to do. And all the discussion here is informal, obviously, and non-binding. And the Planning Commission in its review, we tried to put some bullet points in your staff report of what they discussed. Parking was certainly an issue. The placement of the road was a concern. And in this, it's the placement of this road they thought maybe if it moved closer to those buildings, you could have more open space. Design of the buildings was a concern that they had, making it more like a Littleton-type development. I'm trying to think of some, parking was mentioned several times, Rob, am I missing anything?
Just some other things about the layout, breaking up the kind of the long rows of housing
Yes.
along the different rights of way, kind of helping pedestrian connectivity through the development, and a number of
Breaking, so the long facades to get more pass-throughs in those areas, they thought would be a big benefit.
Carolyn and Karina.
We had a housing study that we saw the results on this, I don't know, a lot fewer than 6 months ago, probably. How does this fit in with the requirements that were laid out?
So there, in the housing study, there was identified a desire and a need for starter homes that are under approximately $300,000. We visited the applicant's website to find out what this product in general was going for. Generally speaking, it starts at about $400,000, and that's the start. So, as it moves or if the application moves forward, we can have the applicant give you some detailed information on pricing, but we think this might be a little over that target of $300,000 for starter homes.
Karina?
Thank you, Carol. Just asked one of my questions, but may I always have two. So my second question.
You always have a spare.
So my second question, perhaps this was addressed. I apologize for being late. Less about this particular design, but maybe taking a step back and looking at what considerations do we need to make from City Council in thinking about changing zoning from industrial, which is job creation, to residential? Can you give me a sense of, how much in industrial zoned property we have, what the demand for it is, and if we're taking supply away from a market that is still strong and there is a need that we potentially can still fulfill with the space in Littleton, but maybe taking that away with the residential.
Certainly. So we've estimated that industrial land in Littleton is about 8.5% of all zones in the city. So it's a fairly rare zoning district, I guess. You could call it that. That does take into account the industrial areas in South Park. And we've also estimated that there's a high vacancy rate for industrial buildings. It could be as high as 34% estimated. So the current industrial areas are not fully utilized. Average commercial vacancy rate in Littleton is about 2.3%. So industrial at 30% is a big difference. There are definitely...
Other cities don't have any left.
You've been talking to Denise, I can tell. That's exactly what she said. So, in terms of relative costs, we certainly know that residential development is more expensive to serve and doesn't generate the property tax values. So it probably results in more expenditures than it does revenues. Industrial development that's fully utilized generates revenues for the city, but not on the same scale as retail development. So those are, it's a great line of questioning. If the project moves forward, we'll have a more detailed analysis of that type of information for you. This is kind of broad brush type information, but we'll have some detailed analysis of that as it moves forward.
Jerry and then Kyle.
Cool. One for our city attorney. You're familiar with this process?
Somewhat, yes.
He's been here for an hour.
Are you comfortable with this process? I mean, it's,
Before?
yeah, you're okay with this type of process?
Sure,
Okay, cool. Then I just want to make sure. So for the developers then, I don't care for the density of it. It's way too, I'm assuming developers are just right there.
The one tonight.
I'm talking to the audience. Yeah, I can talk to this developers too. Too dense for me. It's just way too dense. The parking is obviously an issue too there. It's the street parking, again, over there, it's been a parking issue ever. And that before, when it was just Norgan over there. The other thing, as far as the cost goes, last thing we need is low-income housing over there. There's a lot of it over there, and I think if it's not affordable for some, that's just the way it is. I think if we can bring in higher-income folks over there, that would be great for that neighborhood, because we need to boost up that neighborhood and help out some of the retail that's over there. It has always been a tough retail spot, just to the east of there and even to the south there. We've done all kinds of studies over there over the years. So as far as the product goes, I think it'll be a great area for sale and stuff. But again, if it's too dense, I'm not going to care for it too much. That's it. Thanks.
Kyle?
Yeah, just some kind of feedback to staff to relate to the developers. So we're looking at a rezone from industrial to residential, and to kind of echo some sentiments about what other council members said of, well, fits the current area. And I do think residential fits that area better than industrial. I mean, it is off of Broadway and off of Littleton, so I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the height. I don't really have an issue with the height being that much higher. The density, I don't have that huge of an issue, but it looks like they're asking for higher density. I mean, this is single-family residential. What is our most dense single-family residential? That'd be R3?
R5, unless you're
Well,
in CA, which would be allowed.
Well, that'd be multifamily, wouldn't it? Well, I mean,
Correct.
Okay.
It would be, but it would also have for single family.
okay, but I'm just looking at the density comparison. It looks like it'd be a little higher density than R3, where it's individual lots, versus, it's definitely not up to R5, where it'd be, apartments and whatnot there. The height is higher than the surrounding 30. It looks like they're asking for things, for us to compromise on things, and what are we getting back here? I'm not seeing something, they're towing the line on the open space right there. They're going above on the height, and they're going, pretty high in the density there. So, I want to, how can we compromise and get something more, whether it is affordable housing, if there is some way to keep some units affordable, or whether it is to have more open space, or to have, reduce the density a little bit and open up, one of the slides with the layout of the lots there with the houses, going in on that private drive on the south off of Powers there, removing those two units right next to that street there where it opens up a little bit, so it's not kind of that pocket park isn't concealed in there and opens up a little bit more and makes it a little more inviting. So I'm, just trying to see what the developer would be willing to offer the city is.
Fair question. Carol?
Karina, yes, Karina's my role model. Usually she asks my second question. That's her first question.
Ask your question. Just ask your
My question.
Word taken.
On open space, they have the minimum amount of open space, yet that retention pond, I know that technically qualifies as open space, but functionally it doesn't. It's tucked back there in the corner. You can't walk a dog there. You probably can't have a picnic there. And it's, it's not in a usable place. So I think it's a technicality rather than a true open space situation there. And then the other is, I think this came up in the Planning Commission meeting. My other question is, what is the square footage of a lot here?
So they're, let's see, I think they were 28 by 50 or,
16, or 26 by 50, 28 by 50, and 22.
So what do we have, something like 2,500 square feet?
1,300, 1,200 square feet.
1,200 square feet for a lot for a single-family house. And then, so far as I know, R3 is, what, about 6,500 square feet per lot?
I would have to go.
Something like that?
That's in that ballpark.
So this is so much smaller, 1,200 square feet for a single-family home compared to our smallest at 6,500 square feet. Yikes. This is being called single-family housing, but it really isn't. It's really multi. It just happens to have 6 feet between the buildings. I've done a lot of walking in Littleton Village with the people there who are upset with it, who live there. That's high density. For Littleton, anyway.
Trina?
So given that this is a PD, I guess this is more of a question to staff. How do we begin to lead our development to our existing zoning standards as opposed to creating more exceptions, which is exactly what a PD is?
Thank you.
And so that will give us a little bit more of, when we talk about, or we'll make comments about this as more density than Littleton is looking for, et cetera. That's part of the reason we have the zoning that we have. We have the R5s, the R4s, the R3s. So how do we develop within our existing zoning as opposed to develop with exceptions, which are the continuation of PDs that then we lose the intent or overall goal if there's always exceptions to that. So I don't know which particular element is close or far from some existing zoning that we have, but that would help us at least start to align better to what is our standard zoning.
So as
You don't have to address it now, but it's
Yeah.
feedback,
Yeah, it's great feedback. We do have requirements for rezoning as far as the number of acres is concerned. And, if council directs us to, we can look at different ways to change that. We do have a comprehensive plan coming up this year, and it may help us in that regard.
And again, I don't know how far away this is from, so I can compare it to R5, but I don't know what this looks like compared to R4, R3, so it's probably not R3 either, given what Carol just shared with us, but does this maybe get closer to something that already exists right now?
Right, and as Councilmember Fay said, the difficulties are within the lot size, the minimum lot width, meaning the setbacks with lots when they're this small, and then the height included with that. So there's several components of this that are difficult. And I think it's a great policy question to ask. How do we work with our code to direct development to use those straightforward zone districts? So.
Yeah, this is definitely a development that would not fit the categorical district in
Several
Littleton.
components.
So there may have to be some give somewhere.
For a product like this,
Yes.
yeah.
Carol?
And again, going back over to Littleton Village, which is a product of the same developer, and it looks very, very, very similar. There have been significant quality problems there. I've also been pulled into them. I mean, serious, significant quality problems. So far as I know, there is a lawsuit, at least one. I would guess there are more likely 3. One I know for sure, others I've heard of, I haven't confirmed them. And this is about the quality of the original construction.
Okay, I'm going to make a few comments. Does anybody else at council have any other additional comments? And then, did you have any comments?
I had a question. Did I hear you say that the internal street is a private street?
It's currently proposed to be a private street.
Okay, so who would maintain that?
I can't say.
Association.
Will there be a homeowner association?
Yes, well, I would expect there to be a homeowners association in a development like this because you've got lots of
Common?
common open space. And some of these-
HOA or a metro district?
So we can work that out with the applicant, but on a development of this size, I'd expect it to be an HOA, but we can work with the developer there.
Okay, Carol?
Similar development, Littleton Village, they have a metro district. And the metro district has not been maintaining the property to the satisfaction of the residents at all. The residents are really upset.
Okay, a couple comments. I have huge issues with the parking, and like I said, I think part of that is that we have a minimum requirement for parking, and it takes into no consideration how parking is actually used, particularly in these areas where you don't have a three-car garage that has 3 parking spaces in front of it and street parking in front of your house. None of that happens here, so you end up really, what I hope doesn't happen is that if this moves forward, I hope that there's a consideration by the developer about what happens after their last truck pulls off the property and people are now living on that property and trying to function with 3 cars and guests, or 2 cars and storage in their garage and guests that come to show up. And like I said, I'm speaking from experience. It creates quite a problem, and all of it could be, this is where it gets fixed. It can be handled much differently. I think that the other challenge with this in terms of the cars is that there is bus transit off of Littleton Boulevard and then Broadway, there's no light rail transit close by there. You can catch the bus, and they've actually reduced a lot of our bus routes to the light rail, so it may be even more challenging. So our light rail transit is a challenge in this area. So again, that's why I think that, certainly in terms of considering parking and car usage, it's definitely going to be higher usage. Planning had made a comment about moving that road. I guess I think that's just a even swap of you either take away that green space in front of the other properties and make a bigger park, or do it as it is. I think it's the same amount. So I think it would depend on what aesthetically looks best. I agree with Carol on the detention pond. I think it has no function as open space or green space whatsoever. I don't really have a problem with the height. I think we have certain parts of town where height can be absorbed, where height can be handled. There's no views being cut by that height here. Actually, they kind of have to get to that height in order for their product to be what it is, which is these top-level patios that have a view of probably, depending on what the elevation is, you could get the mountains and even downtown. Some of the ones at Littleton Village have pretty spectacular views until they built the other ones, and now they just don't have views. But I'm watching this product go up on County Line, and it is packed in, it is tight, it is dense, it is a different type of living. It's a different type of living than what we've, previously seen in Littleton, and what I think a lot of having to work around these construction defects and not being able to do the types of condos, and you just don't see people do these single stories anymore. Land just costs too much. These are definitely going to be for a younger population, primarily because they have 4 sets of stairs running up and down. So they're definitely for a younger demo, which is important for us to draw a younger demo. I agree with Jerry. I think it's a nice kind of upscale addition to the neighborhood. I think it will invigorate some additional redevelopment in that neighborhood and hopefully some retail redevelopment. I would really like to see, in terms of some of the stuff Kyle was talking about, maybe there's a way that this developer and the development can help to provide or to, support the surrounding neighborhood. It's a neighborhood that is challenged with a number of challenges in terms of economics and those types of things. It's a lot of really, really great kids. There's really very active churches in that area. There's a lot of very engaged citizens who live in that area. And so I think, how do you weave into the community? Because this does stand out very much from what's in that community right now. It's very, very different. So I'd like to see some thought into how do you weave in and not just stand out. I think that the builder and developer obviously did the math. The density is probably what maths out. Start taking buildings off, creating green space. It doesn't math out anymore. If 400,000 is the starting price, they'll probably they'll sell some at 400, and then it goes to 450 and 475, and then they get a waiting list, and it goes way up, and by then they're back up to this echelon that is not affordable for a lot of folks. That's economics. But those are kind of my thoughts on it. I think that it would be, what we hope with this P4 is that there's some consideration. Some of our stuff is pie in the sky. Some of our stuff is obviously not realistic because we don't know the math on it. But we also are the ones that are far more invested in our community. And so we really hope that something like this, I think, is an asset, but done correctly, it could be even greater. So, Council, any additional comments? If not, we will move on.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
We're just going to go straight to our next item, which is
Trouble.
council travel and reimbursement policy. Council, this is an issue that came up a bit ago, and we didn't do much about it. And this was an ask by Councilmember Fay in terms of some of the outreach that she's doing in her district. And so Councilmember Fay has asked that we reconsider this. And so what the ask here is pretty simple. This is one of the options that we discussed, was to give each council person the opportunity to expense out for reimbursement $500 per year. Paul? $500 per year for community outreach in their district or throughout the city as the at-large. They would be expenses that would be paid for by the council member and then reimbursed by the city. And I think Tiffany's asked the reimbursement to be turned in within 60 days?
30 days.
30 days. So I guess Councilmember Fay, if you want to say a few words. Tiffany, were you here to answer questions? Or do you have
Yes.
Okay, great.
No PowerPoint tonight.
No,
Oh,
how can
Tiffany.
you function?
But we did save you for last.
Thank you.
You've heard me speak a couple times when council speaks at the end of a regular meeting about the district meetings. So we had 4 of them last year. People come who aren't in District 3. We had nearly 40 people a couple weeks ago. So that would be the 5th one we've had. I think the highest attendance was this summer around 60, 65, something like that. Fortunately, we did have enough chairs. And when I proposed to the group that on a week or so ago that maybe we didn't need to have meetings so often. No, keep them orderly, because a way for people to get brought up to date and ask questions. And, it's expensive to get the word out. There isn't an inexpensive way to do that. So I figure I spent well over $1,000 of my own money in 2018, and have had meeting number 1 for this year too. I think the other council members could do other things besides what I'm doing to connect with citizens as well, if you wanted to. It really is rewarding because it creates an informal, away from city center place for people just to be themselves.
Over the years, council members have done different things. I used to do council board meetings. I think having a small fund in order to be able to pay for refreshments, or if you wanted to print handouts or even do a little bit of marketing or something like that, I think that I don't have a problem with it. $500 is not a lot of money for one council person for a year for a district or for an at-large. If you use it, you use it. If you don't, you don't. It doesn't carry over. I can't give Carol mine if I'm not going to use it.
I never thought of asking.
I think it's, it will go through the proper accounting systems to make sure everything is legit. I think if this is something council's interested in approving, we'll put a resolution on the next meeting, put it under consent, and it'll just become part of the protocols for the guidelines for travel.
What is the travel part?
Travel reimbursement.
Oh, it's part of that.
It's the existing system.
And council, yeah. Kyle?
Yeah, I support this, and I have to commend Carol for doing this and putting all that time and effort and her own money into doing that. It's something that I fully intended to do, but for numerous reasons was not able to get around, so I think this is a great idea, I support that. And the only issue I have, and it's not really that big of an issue, being at-large versus district, if it's about communication and getting around that, would be a bit more difficult to, spread $500 around the whole city versus one, but that's just not really that big of a stink to make, but just a consideration.
The other, Karina?
I think it's a good start. I think it's a nominal amount, but does go a long way as well for just what it potentially could take, right? People can use it in different ways for the purpose of outreach and connecting with our citizens. Is there anything we need to think about given that it's city funds, about what, not that I want to censor what we put on there, but there's probably some things we're allowed to do and not do when we put out communication that's funded. At the end of the day, it's funded by the city. So is there anything we just need to think about? Maybe it's not an issue now, but just in the future, some kind of parameters of what you can say, can't say, what's advertising versus just sharing information or communicating?
Well, my understanding is that we're looking at community outreach kinds of efforts, and if you think about what you would normally do if you were going to a chamber meeting or a Arapahoe County government meeting and talking about city issues and bringing people up to date versus what might be getting close to the line of things you shouldn't be doing, like campaigning is always a real easy one.
Yeah.
If it has to do with an issue on the ballot, or if it has to do with a candidate running for office, whether local, state, or federal, you don't do it on city time. You don't use city revenues for it. If it has something that has something to do with a council policy that would impact a business that you or a member of your immediate family have an ownership interest in, and we've got conflict of interest issues. So some of it's just sort of common sense kind of things that if you wouldn't say it or do it in one context, you can't use this $500 to use it in this context. And with everything else, it's always a good idea if you think you're in the gray area to ask first. And what would likely happen in this case, though, is, I mean, let's say you did do a mailing and it stepped over the line on the election results. If I'm understanding the request, you're going to then submit a reimbursement form. It's probably going to go to Tiffany's office, and she's going to see it and say, uh-oh. And then she's going to call our city attorney and say, can we reimburse this? And then you may get a message back or a phone call that says, sorry, you have to eat those costs.
Okay.
Jerry?
Yeah. Why don't we just use Kelly's office to advertise? I mean, that is what she does. I mean, she puts out the communication for the city. And if we're going to have big parties, or whatever the heck you want to call it, organization meetings, that is what she does. She experiments year after year with different techniques on how to outreach the folks. And my method is just, having coffees. I just go out and have coffees with small groups. I don't do the larger groups. That's, it's your choice. But as far as advertising, we have a communication department. The idea of giving a council person who's elected, it's essentially $2,000 over the course of their term. I'm not comfortable with that, and for many reasons, what Ken just kind of touched on. I would rather go through the city to make sure it is not a campaigning thing, that it is addressing specific issues, than giving it to just a council member to let them have it. We have a communication department, that's what they're for.
Mark, do you want to address?
Well, certainly, city communications could perhaps manage some of that. I think that I'd be a little concerned that if all council members started asking for that service, then I think we might start having kind of a resource problem. And I think too that it might start to kind of maybe crowd some of the other priorities that council probably would expect us to do, Littleton Report or some of our events. So I think at some level, I probably wouldn't have a problem with it, but I think if it got too popular with council, then I'm not sure I can deliver.
But Littleton Report is where it would be advertised.
Sure.
Emails, the social media. I mean, and if we can keep adding other stuff on the city staff by adding other boards, commissions, and tasks, why can't city council also add another little task? It seems interesting that we can't give them an extra task, but we can have other boards and things added where it's not going to take a lot of staff time, but we want to do it. It could be overwhelming.
We type 7.
Well, we have to be mindful of the staff time, of course. I'm just not comfortable with saying, council member, you have $2,000 over the course of your term. Go use this money and don't violate campaign laws. I think it does get a little touchy, and it should be in the report. It should be available for all people to be able to find out about these meetings.
Marina? So the concern here is if we're setting aside $3,500 for community outreach individually in our own way, is maybe the challenge you're putting out there for us, Jerry, to say, could that $3,500, if there's a need for community outreach, could that $3,500 be incremental money within the marketing team to do more community outreach if it's needed? Is that kind of what you're challenging here as well? It's like, why do we do it individually as opposed to one of the purposes of our marketing and communications department is to do that community outreach?
They are the ones that know how to do community outreach, and they are constantly changing their techniques on how to do it better. I mean, we've done coffees from time to time. I think we still do those. I think they're the ones that should be doing this outreach. It should be done in a way so that all people in the city have an opportunity to go to whatever council meeting it is. If we're leaving it up to council meeting just to do their outreach, there's an opportunity for people not to be aware of those meetings. We should have it so that if there's a city function, then there should be a method that the city handles it so that everybody has an opportunity to be made aware of it.
Other comments?
Yeah, I agree with Jerry. I think we've got several information vehicles now. If we're not getting those out enough to people, I mean, if people don't know about them, then like some people don't know about Nextdoor, maybe we need to do more to get people to know about what we do have that they can learn from. But I think it should be a city function.
Karina?
I would love some feedback from Carol on, as you've been doing this, what is it that this outreach is able to accomplish that other things that we are doing as a citywide is perhaps not? Is this filling the gap as far as you see it?
As far as methods for bringing people in, we have been asking at the meetings, how did you find out about this meeting? And it turned out, I had it in the Littleton report, that no one who has attended the meetings found out about it from the Littleton report. I'm not saying that people don't read it, it's just people were there. The best is signage. And so I had 20 yard signs made that announced the meetings. And that's where a lot of expense has gone. People said that's number one. And I always put them in the same place so they know to look there. And I make sure that they aren't in a right of way. They're legally placed on private property and all that.
The city will come and yank them out.
Yes. Let's see, email, the challenge with email is to get the email addresses. I found that the city, for the most part, doesn't have email addresses of citizens, or Mark is saying no. So that isn't a way to do it. It would be a great way to do it, but they aren't available. I spent a lot of personal time, hours and hours and hours and hours, and money, having postcards printed. And I used voter registration addresses. So that was extremely time intensive and pretty expensive to get postcards printed, and then the postage, around 40 cents each. And so that's sticking on labels, or getting the labels printed, sticking on labels, sticking on stamps. And the city wouldn't be able to do that either, I learned. So these are all things that the city, only one of the things, those things the city could do, which was the Littleton report. And that's the one that people said that isn't where they found out about it. As far as what can be done that isn't done somewhere else, and it's about having an informal group conversation, sort of, heavily monitored conversation, where people can bring their concerns informally. I think the informalness is an important part. Did that answer? Yeah.
So I support this. I think that, I think that it's up to each individual council person how you want to be in your district, or how you want to be in the community. And like I said, I did these district meetings for years, and I fortunately was able to build up substantial email list, and so was able to use that. But I started off doing the mailings
But
too.
it started at nothing, yeah.
And it does take a lot of work, but the meetings were well attended. The reception was always great. The people that were there were always grateful. There was some great conversations, some great discussions, great learnings. It's always, I think, the informal aspect of it is a value. I think that the city does a great job with outreach. We do our meet and greets. We were doing those coffees. We aren't doing those because they were very poorly attended. So I really do think this is something different. It's $3,500 if we all use it, and it's 10% of our budget, our council budget. Not that budget. And I
worried, huh? What happened?
And I think it's an opportunity. We do receive a monthly stipend, but we are not paid any sort of a living wage. We do receive most of our expenses are reimbursed, although many of us don't even turn in half of our expenses that we endure. And so, I think this is a way to help cover some of the costs. Carol, I think that based on what you're doing now, the $500 is just a drop in the bucket. You will be spending more on top of that. And I think that if there's a way that can help and get more people there or provide a higher level quality of experience for people, I would say go for it. So we're going to go around, and this is just a yes or no to put it on a resolution on the, I guess we don't have another meeting until May.
March.
I'm driven.
Say
March.
May, we'll be-
So Peggy, you're a no.
That's a study session, the 26th.
Kyle?
That's right.
Kyle, you're a,
Yes, though Jerry did raise some points I hadn't, thought of that. But yes.
I'm a yes. Jerry?
No.
Carol?
Yes.
Karina?
I'm a yes for now, to put it, so this will go on a consent agenda? I think, I agree, I think Jerry brought up some good points and something for us to think about. Is this something that, we can revisit every year? So this would be, could this, I slumped.
Yeah, no.
And the reason I'm saying that is, let's learn from this, right? So let's understand what is outreach that maybe each of us are doing individually that seems to be working to then say, I think this is a learning we need to bring into the organization and do across the board. So I'd really like to use this almost as an opportunity of
It's a
getting
yes.
that feedback. It's a yes. That's why I'm saying a yes, because I see this as an opportunity to learn what our community is responding to and bring it back to the organization for us to improve internally.
And follow up on Karina's comments. I think in the necessity to learn from this, but also in transparency and accountability to have some sort of reporting of what these funds have been used on for council, and also for the travel. So at least for to say this is council members are using $3,000 for this, just to kind of have some report to kind of see if it's being used properly.
And what are council members doing with the emails? If people are collecting email addresses, that is. If they're collecting email addresses, what are they doing with those email addresses? I mean, come campaign time, if they're using those emails, addresses, and sending out emails for donations, requests, or campaigning, I think that's a way of getting email addresses for campaigning.
So I think we'll learn this year is kind of my point, is so that we can kind of test some of this and determine where we need to set boundaries.
I would recommend that we do include as a caveat to this that any printed material that we do, make sure it runs past the city attorney's office, just for a check, just so it can be blessed, just to be sure.
Disagree, but if it's a reimbursement and it doesn't fly, then the person's on the hook for their own
But it's
money.
already been sent out to the public, so if it's checked before it goes out, because if there's incorrect information or something that slipped by, it isn't about whether it'll be reimbursed, it's about whether or not.
Just the appearance and the perception of.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just a double check. Tiffany?
I was just going to add, to address one of the concerns about using information for campaigning or ballot questions or something, we could add a sentence in this section that specifically prohibits that from occurring. I have an example from another city that says any publications or postage supported by city funds shall not urge voters to support or vote in favor or against any ballot question or candidate. So we could add that simple language to the policy if you prefer.
Question kind of on that for the attorney. How do you tread that line and say you have a district meeting, you say, I'm just having a district meeting, you mail it out to the people in your district, and there is a ballot issue up, and people keep asking you about that. Is there an issue with that, you even though you didn't mail specific to a ballot issue or an election,
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to use your best judgment. The way, I guess I would suggest handling it if you're in that situation, you know, it's, maybe this isn't a good analogy, but I'm going to use it anyway because it feels right. You know you're not supposed to talk about quasi-judicial matters outside of the public hearing, and yet you may get cornered in the grocery store by somebody who really doesn't want that development. And they, you know, you just have to politely keep telling them it's not appropriate to talk about it here. So if somebody presses you on, well, how are you going to support this ballot issue? Or why if it's a local issue, why did the council put that on the ballot? Then it's absolutely appropriate to say, council had a meeting and these are the issues that were discussed at the meeting, it was put on the ballot. Well, you know, what are you doing to campaign for it, and how have you gone out and gotten people to support it, and why am I getting these mailings? I think you can say, look, this is a public meeting that we're having in my capacity as your council member, and we're here to talk about city business, and the law does not allow any of us on city time to be talking about or using city resources, which is really what put this meeting together, to be promoting or opposing an issue on the ballot. When this meeting is over, you just want to talk to me one-on-one about it when we go outside, happy to talk to you about it. You want to set up a time to have coffee next week? Happy to talk to you about it. This isn't the right place to do it because the city is incurring taxpayer costs to put this meeting together and to make it available to the public. And sometimes people don't get it, just like people don't get why they can't talk to their elected officials about a public hearing meeting. Damn it, I voted for you. I should be able to lobby you on this. Well, there are reasons why you're not supposed to do that, and sometimes you have to be seen as the bad guy when you just refuse to engage.
Okay, we have enough to put it on, or maybe we'll put it on general business.
Yeah, I can put it on general business.
Okay.
Would you like us to add any information regarding the voter or candidates?
You know, one thing I think would be helpful is if, Mark, maybe if you could talk to Kelly and find out what the impact would be if, as Jerry said, we individually would ask for her department to help with these things. What kind of impact what would that do?
Sure, I'd be happy to have that
Get an
discussion.
idea.
And what types of things she couldn't do? Like, could or couldn't she not do a mailing? I mean, the yard signs, like you said, that'd be easy enough to have yard signs just print up and council members could just take them as they wished, I guess.
Well, and regardless of what Kelly does, this is still taxpayer dollars that she's using.
Right.
So,
So is this, so.
right, that was the issue.
Right, yeah.
So if, you know, and how much, what does she think it would end up costing? Because it would cost probably substantially more than $500 for each of us.
Yeah.
All right, we'll have that discussion
Yes,
with
get it.
Kelly, see what kind of information we can put together here. And we'll
Okay.
put this under general business.
Yeah.
If it does pass, the level of review that's being suggested here would probably most appropriate would come up during the budget process.
Yeah.
where We've got information we typically share with council about a lot of our programs.
Okay. We could always move the $3,500 to our charitable donation. Okay, we have a couple of little cleanup or kind of detailing things we want to do before we adjourn. City manager has two things, and then I have one.
Just a couple things to bring to your attention. Perhaps you've seen some of the correspondence here. Our state legislature has got a bill that is moving through the process here, House Bill 1086. It's requiring licensed plumbers to be part of an inspection program at local government level. And this is raising a lot of concern with the cities here because we don't necessarily have licensed plumbers as part of our inspection teams. And so I'm going to be asking council to consider a resolution here the next time for us to submit to our state legislature in opposition of that. While we're going through a process now trying to estimate the cost to us, I would say it's north of $100,000 annually for this, perhaps much more. So there's a challenge, quite honestly, just finding licensed plumbers to be on an inspection team. So I think this is something that I don't think is in our best interest. I don't think it's in the best interest of our citizens. I think that this is a misplaced intent here.
It's sort of an unfunded mandate.
It is.
CML is pretty aggressively working to fight it. A number of municipalities have already sent letters, and we've gotten a couple of CML alerts to call on this. So it's being pushed really hard by the Teamsters, and I can't remember who's carrying the legislation, but it's getting some traction. Some of these things come in and they immediately die. This one's got a little bit of traction. It may not last, but this is the time for us to really, so we'll put that on as a consent agenda item, as a resolution that then we'll send out.
Mark, can you go ahead and send the legislation to us?
Absolutely. I'll put all sorts of background material together when we put this thing together. Absolutely. The only other thing I wanted to mention is that the mayor here has made us aware that there is a specific program funded by the state. It's called the Downtown Payment Assistance Program. The state actually works for the city and county of Denver. Cities then can sign an agreement and ask Denver to manage this.
Down payment,
Oh, what did I say?
downtown.
Oh, down payment, sorry. Down payment assistance program. The intent here is to help kind of low mod income level people here actually afford kind of the down payment here for some of these homes and purchase of residence. Historically, Littleton has participated in this program in the past, and this is really no cost to the city, none whatsoever. It's just we are deferring to the city and county of Denver to kind of manage the application process. And so I have actually a handout if you're interested in seeing it now, but I might ask council to consider this through a resolution here and for us to proceed with that and consent here at our next regular meeting.
Yes, I'd like to see that because I'm just not completely following. So is this something that we're doing now and we're just asking Denver to manage it for us?
We have to do this on almost an annual basis here to for the council to approve the action formally through a resolution and then ultimately sign an agreement. It's an annual, for us it'll be an annual decision, and again, it costs us nothing. It's state funds managed by the city and county of Denver.
But the citizens of Littleton can't use it unless we are part of it.
That's correct.
So
Oh, I see. So there's state funding available to help with down payments. A municipality has to participate in this program for citizens to be able to take advantage of this state
Correct.
grant.
Yeah, without your action, they cannot participate in this program within Littleton.
It also helps with getting lower interest rates also. So they are able to help secure some of those. I was telling Mark, I bought my first home off this. It was called something different at the time, but the lender that I was using said, "Have you ever heard of this?" And of course I hadn't. And there were only, I think, 12 loans available, and they were only for Denver citizens, Denver residents. I was a Denver resident at the time, and I got the last one. But it got me into my first home. So it's even more valuable now, which is as hard as it is for people to get into their first homes.
How do people find out about this other than from your mortgage lender? So by participating in the program, do we also get any kind of material to share with citizens or?
Yeah, how it's communicated, I can't answer that right now, but yeah, fair question.
Probably put it on, it would.
Yeah, we can certainly put it on our webpage and things like that, but
Yeah.
Seems like lenders would be the one that would be promoting it.
Lenders or realtors.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the
Realtor
ones that,
Association.
that's how I found out about it. And it's evolved over the years, so it's I think it actually stopped for a number of years, and now it's kind of come back, and it's a little bit different program now, but there's a lot of information on it, so you can get that back out to us.
yeah, I see Tiffany waving frantically over.
Oh, geez.
Wants to add something.
I just wanted to add, I'm not necessarily sure that it's a lower interest rate. I think there's down payment assistance, but they do opt for a different interest rate that might be offered by a bank or something. So,
Well, it does say interest rate, help with interest rate, so.
Is it Metro
It's-
DPA, is that what it's called?
What?
Metro DPA, is that what it's
Yes,
called?
that's correct.
just want to clarify that.
Yeah, we can get
And
that.
there's Boulder, Arvada, Westminster, and Lakewood have already opted in, so just give you a few.
Sounds like a great value add for for our citizens. We're just making it accessible to them.
Yeah, if they go to get a house and their lenders, and they say, you know, do we have that program? The lender would have to say, no, we don't do that in Littleton. Or Littleton doesn't participate. So it's just giving them the opportunity to say, yeah, Littleton's list on the list.
Anyways, that's the
Okay.
end of my updates.
Cool. Okay, so next week we have boards and commission interviews Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Just leave it now.
Kind of like our spring budget season. So, don't forget, when you leave here today, get your packet out of your mailbox.
Oh, let me bring my key.
Jerry knows how to get in.
Yeah?
Yeah. Jerry, we help Karina get hers out of the mailbox.
I do.
And,
I'll give it a shot. Maybe so.
maybe I know how to get in.
Talent, I'm not.
And
know,
so-
yes, I do. Yes, I do. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I wanted to ask each of you is there any part of the process that, particularly at the end, the very last day when we're going through our notes, furiously going through our notes and trying to come up with our final choices, and then we kind of do our roundabout. And I know I've talked to Karina, and she's got some challenged by some of the things in the way that it's done. But, so I thought I would just ask each of you, because I'm working on perhaps a way to improve that process. Maybe there is not a way to improve it, and we just keep going. We've done it that way for years. It never feels 100% perfect, but I think if it felt 100% perfect, we would have been doing something wrong. So.
Yeah, we almost always do it the same way.
Yeah, we do. Right. So one of the things I do want to add this year is I do want to give us a dedicated 15 minutes after the last interview and before we started, so that I think that there's a value in us kind of going into our corners and kind of processing everything that just came through, and so that we can be clear, a little more clear-headed. I think in the past, I've always felt rushed. And if you get done before 15 minutes, fine, go take a break. But I would like to calendar that in on the schedule. That way, and if everybody's done in 10 minutes,
What's
then
usually,
we'll go ahead and
if you're
start.
running the meeting, it's usually you who are rushed, because the rest of us have the time.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but I think it does help too, because 3 nights in a row, and then we've got the people from Tuesday night trying to meld that in, and then there's always that challenge of the second choices and stuff, and so trying to just organize our thoughts a little bit better, and that might just make it ease the pain a little bit. So, Peggy, do you have any thoughts?
Geez. As in, I like what we
Trick
do,
question,
and
Peggy.
we just have to do it. It's tough.
Time's up.
Kyle?
That was almost as profound as the new buildings aren't as historic as the old buildings.
Did you like that?
No, I don't have anything to change.
Okay. Jer?
No.
Carol?
I think that's a good idea to have a little
Yeah.
One? Okay.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Yeah, that.
Is that what you're asking? Okay.
Or any other thought?
No, nothing new.
Okay.
Just thinking about what you said and reflecting on, there's 3 days. So who I see on Tuesday is just not going to be as fresh as who I see on Thursday potentially. How would you guys feel? Right now we just do the 1, 2, and 3. How would you guys feel of, instead of it being about 1, 2, or 3, maybe there's like a scale of 1 to 10. And as you're interviewing each person, you're deciding, is it a 10, is it a 7, is it a 4, is it a 1? So that when you get to the end of the 3 days, you're just adding numbers as opposed to...
Go ahead and do it that way. I got my way, you do your way. Yeah, I just do the 1, 2, 3. That works for me.
You're right, I can do that my way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
that works
actually
for
the
you.
way I do it on my paper, is that I give them that kind of a rating.
Yeah.
I give them actually A, B, C, D.
And then as somebody comes up, I number them too. Then do they bump somebody
No, we
else?
don't, we should.
What was that?
Those of you who were here the last time I was here know that I don't particularly enjoy saying when I was on Arvada City Council. Yeah, we do. But I actually found it very helpful. We had the same issue. The city clerk who was there at the meeting would take a Polaroid of every applicant when they came in, and maybe they did it different. Maybe they had electronic.
That would be fun, actually.
And they attached it to each of the council resumes. So you at least had a face with a name, and then when you went back after 3 days of interviews, you looked at a photograph and did, I remember that person.
If it's good enough for American Idol, it's good enough for us.
And I think that also might be a nice icebreaker, or
Do they still sell Polaroids?
I don't know.
sure they do.
Well, actually, what probably makes more sense is take an electronic picture and then make 7 copies of it. And
Yeah,
Or just put it on the TV when we're talking about it.
there you go.
We could do that.
Put your mug shots.
That's a good idea.
there's a variety of ways that our staff will be able to.
Wendy's in on that.
Because that is.
That's a great idea, though.
Excellent, thank you.
I like the
You're
Polaroid.
definitely adding value. Friday morning, museum, 7:30, we have breakfast with South Metro Housing Options.
And we're putting out the agenda here in the morning, so you can kind of see.
Okay, everybody make it?
Cool. Is it, and it's just them, it's not planning commission or anybody?
No.
Okay. What about the housing committee board, whatever the heck they were called? They're not coming, okay.
A lot of the South Metro Housing were on that, I think two of them.
Yeah.
And then Peggy sort of got noticed, and you sort of.
There, just get things
Get her
done.
done.
Get things done.
Okay, anything else? All right, we're adjourned.
All right.